When did your child's toxic teacher embarrass themselves at a school event? My 8-year-old son Ethan was practicing his sales pitch in the kitchen, carefully arranging his sample cookies for tomorrow's bake sale. Being autistic, he didn't get to participate in many school events, so this was big for him. He'd just finished doing his best Gordon Ramsay impression when my laptop dinged with an email from his teacher, Mrs. Rhodes. The subject line read, "Bake sale tomorrow." I clicked it open. Hello. Unfortunately, we have decided that it's in everyone's best interests if Ethan doesn't attend the sale tomorrow. He isn't equipped to handle a social booth given his limitations. The other parents have expectations about who represents our school. Thank you for understand. I stared at the screen in disbelief, but before I could close it, Ethan came around the counter. Is that about the bake sale? I tried to minimize the window, but he'd already seen it. His face crumpled as he read the words. She thinks I have limitations? His voice turned small. I'm not allowed to go? The tears started immediately. Not a meltdown, just silent water rolling down his face. I thought Mrs. Rhodes liked me. His voice cracked. The other parents don't want me there? That's not true, baby. Am I too stupid to sell cookies? He was sobbing now. I just wanted to help buy Grandma's wheelchair. I pulled him into my arms. Listen to me. We are going to that bake sale. Mrs. Rhodes doesn't get to decide what you can do. But she said, she's wrong, and everyone's going to know it. But what if she kicks me out? Then Dad will use his big boot to kick her out and bring you back in. He was laughing now. I wiped his tears. You want to make the most amazing booth that school has ever seen? His eyes lit up slightly. Really? Really? We're going to make Mrs. Rhodes's jaw drop. A small smile appeared. Can we make extra cookies? We're making extra everything. I grabbed my phone and texted my 3 best friends, forwarding the email. Look what Ethan's teacher just sent. My phone exploded. That bitch. Is she serious? We're coming over now. My husband came home minutes later, saw Ethan furiously whipping batter in the kitchen, and when I told him, his face went dark. He came up to Ethan. I'm going to the restaurant supply store. Ethan looked confused. Why? You'll see. Start baking, buddy. Catch you with a twist. Ethan's eyes sparkled. Dad only ever said that phrase when he had a surprise for Ethan. His dad drove off, and within an hour, my friends were in our kitchen. We're making this booth legendary, one of them said, pulling out decorating supplies. Another friend started designing a banner on her laptop. Chef Ethan's cookies for Grandma. Ethan's eyes went wide. Chef Ethan? He said with a cautious smile. My husband returned an hour later with a small canopy tent, professional display cases, and even a cash register. But then he pulled out the best part, a custom apron with Chef Ethan embroidered on it. Ethan's jaw dropped. Is that for me? Every professional baker needs proper attire. Ethan was damn near crying with joy, running the whole kitchen like Gordon Ramsay, doing his impressions at my friends, showing him how to make the batter how he wanted, getting it all over their noses, encouraging them to eat it, having so much fun my heart was about to explode. Somewhere in the midst, I got a follow-up email from Mrs. Rhodes, just checking in to make sure you saw this. There will be consequences. I didn't respond. By the end of the night, we'd made 400 cookies in 15 varieties, all labeled with ingredients and allergen cards. Mrs. Rhodes is going to die when she sees this. One of my friend's husbands owned a print shop and even showed up with professional menu boards and price lists. Ethan practiced with the cash register. I can do this, right, Mom? You can do anything, son. He tried on his apron, looking in the mirror. Do I look professional? Like you own a bakery. The next morning, we loaded everything up. Ethan wore his chef apron with a matching hat. What if she tells me to leave? He asked in the car. Then every parent there will defend you. Really? Really? They all know what she wrote. We arrived an hour early to set up. When other parents saw our tent with Chef Ethan's cookies banner, they started gathering. This is incredible. Word spread fast. By the time the bake sale opened, we had a line of 20 people. Ethan stood tall in his chef outfit, explaining each cookie type, running the register perfectly. Mrs. Rhodes arrived and froze. Her face went from confident to pale. She watched Ethan handle every order, make changes, recommend cookies based on preferences. Thank you, Chef Ethan, each customer said. Parents were taking photos, posting them to Facebook. The principal soon appeared. Ethan, this is incredible. How did you do all this? Mrs. Rhodes just stood there, mouth open, as Ethan cheerfully served customer after customer. By noon, Ethan had raised $400. Parents kept coming up to Mrs. Rhodes. Isn't Ethan doing amazing? She had to nod and smile. That's when she walked over to our booth herself. Ethan gave her a cookie to try for free, one she reluctantly took. I saw her face change as she took the bite, almost like she hated how good it was. I think that was her breaking point, because that's when she pulled out her phone and showed it to the principal. His face dropped immediately. He looked at our booth, then at her, and before we knew it, Mrs. Rhodes was marching to our booth, the principal right beside her. In front of everyone at the bake sale, she held up her phone and started talking loudly about health code violations and how our setup wasn't following proper regulations for food sales. The principal shifted uncomfortably beside her, looking at our professional tent and display cases, while she kept scrolling through her phone, reading off supposed violations from some district policy manual. Parents started gathering around us, their kids holding cookies they'd just bought from Ethan, and I could see them pulling out their phones too. My hands were shaking as I reached under our table for the folder I'd prepared, pulling out every single permit and approval form we'd gotten, including the one from the PTA president that specifically authorized our setup. Mrs. Rhodes's face went from smug to red when she saw the stack of papers, especially when I showed the principal the food handler's permit my husband had gotten last week just to be extra safe. That's when the PTA president herself pushed through the crowd, carrying her tablet and looking mad as hell. She walked right up to the principal and showed him the screen, pointing at the fundraising totals where Ethan's name sat at the very top with over $400 raised, more than double any other booth at the entire sale. Mrs. Rhodes tried to say something about proper procedures, but the PTA president cut her off, confirming she'd personally approved every single aspect of our booth setup and had even helped us get the permits. Parents started speaking up then, one mother saying Mrs. Rhodes had told her that her dyslexic daughter shouldn't be in advanced reading, another father mentioning comments about his son with ADHD being too disruptive for field trips. The principal's face kept getting more and more serious as parent after parent shared their stories, all while Mrs. Rhodes stood there trying to interrupt and defend herself, but nobody was listening to her anymore. George Stafford stepped forward, holding his phone up, announcing he'd been recording the whole morning for the school yearbook and had captured everything, including Mrs. Rhodes telling another parent earlier that certain children shouldn't represent the school. He said he was sending all his videos to the school board and suggested other parents do the same with their recordings, which made Mrs. Rhodes lunge toward his phone, but he stepped back quickly, and several parents moved between them, forming a protective circle around him. Christine Shepard arrived then, having been called by a parent who knew knew she was the district's special education coordinator, and she asked the principal what was happening while looking directly at Mrs. Rhodes with this expression that made the teacher take a step back. My husband handed Christine the printed emails from Mrs. Rhodes, the ones calling Ethan limited and saying he shouldn't represent the school, and I watched her read them with her frown getting deeper and deeper. She asked Mrs. Rhodes to explain the emails in front of everyone, specifically the part about Ethan's limitations, but Mrs. Rhodes just stammered about context and misunderstandings, while parents shook their heads in disgust. Ethan had been frozen during all this chaos, standing behind our cookie display in his chef hat, but when Christine walked over to our booth and smiled at him, he straightened up and started explaining each cookie variety to her. He showed her our ingredient cards, the allergen labels, how he'd organized everything by flavor profile just like Gordon Ramsay would, and she kept nodding and asking questions that made him light up with excitement. She told him his organization was incredible and asked if he'd like to help plan the spring fundraiser, which made him beam, so bright I thought my heart would burst. Mrs. Rhodes suddenly grabbed her stomach and said she felt sick and needed to leave immediately, but the principal told her firmly that they needed to finish addressing this situation first and asked her to wait in his office while he talked to the affected families. She tried to argue, but he wasn't having it, walking her away from the crowd while parents deliberately turned toward our booth, forming a line that stretched past 3 other tables. One father bought $50 worth of cookies and told Ethan loud enough for everyone to hear that he was the best salesperson at the entire event, making my son stand taller in his apron and start taking orders with renewed confidence. There's something peculiar about how quickly Mrs. Rhodes shifted from health code violations to feeling suddenly sick when Christine showed up. I wonder what she's really afraid of here. Parents kept coming up to buy cookies, some taking pictures with Ethan, others posting on Facebook about what had happened, and within minutes our remaining stock was getting low. Christine took out her phone and asked for my contact information, scheduling a meeting for Monday morning to discuss the discrimination and what the district would do about it, assuring me that Ethan's rights under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act had clearly been violated. The principal returned after escorting Mrs. Rhodes to his office, walking straight to our booth and apologizing to our family in front of everyone, saying he had no idea this had been happening and that it would be addressed immediately. He asked Ethan if he'd like to make an announcement about his fundraising goal, handing him the microphone they used for the raffle drawings, and my son's eyes went wide with surprise and excitement. Ethan took the microphone and in his best Gordon impression, thanked everyone for supporting his grandma's wheelchair fund, making the crowd laugh and cheer while several parents pulled out their wallets to buy even more cookies. That's when Molly Sears from the local news station showed up with her camera guy, having been tipped off by a parent who'd been recording everything, and she asked if we'd be willing to share our story on the evening news. I nodded at Molly while Ethan kept serving customers, his hands moving fast to bag cookies and make change. The camera guy set up his equipment near our booth, and Molly knelt down to Ethan's height with her microphone. Ethan told her about practicing his pitch every night for 3 weeks, showing her the note cards he'd made with cookie descriptions and prices. His voice cracked when he mentioned the email saying he had limitations, and I saw 2 moms behind Molly wiping their eyes. The reporter asked him one more question, and Ethan explained how he just wanted to help his grandma get around better, which made Molly pause and clear her throat before thanking him. A black SUV pulled up and the superintendent stepped out, her heels clicking on the pavement as she walked straight toward us. Christine must have called her because she came right to me and pulled me aside near the tent pole. She told me the district would investigate this immediately and handed me her business card with her direct cell number written on the back. My 3 friends had their phones out, typing fast and showing each other their screens. Within minutes, they'd created number Chef Ethan Bakes and were posting pictures of him in his apron serving customers. One friend showed me her phone where parents from Lincoln Elementary were already asking where they could buy cookies. Another mom from across town commented she was driving over right now with her kids. The principal grabbed the microphone they used for raffles and tapped it twice to get everyone's attention. He announced that Ethan's booth had just broken the school's single-day fundraising record with over $600 raised. The crowd erupted in cheers and Ethan took off his chef hat, holding it against his chest as he did a little bow that made everyone laugh. George pulled out his phone and started setting something up on his screen, typing quickly while looking at the videos he'd taken earlier. He turned the phone toward me, showing a GoFundMe page titled "Help Chef Ethan Buy Grandma's Wheelchair," with the video of Mrs. Rhodes trying to grab his phone. The donation counter was already at $300 and climbing as we watched. He scrolled through the comments where people called Mrs. Rhodes disgusting and praised Ethan for his hard work. More teachers started approaching our booth, not Mrs. Rhodes' friends, but the younger ones who taught art and music and PE. They each bought cookies and told me quietly they were sorry about their colleagues' behavior. The PE teacher handed me a folded paper saying it was a letter of support if we needed it for any formal complaints. 2 more teachers did the same thing, pressing the papers into my hand with serious expressions. The afternoon parent volunteers started arriving for their shifts, but they came straight to our booth instead of checking in at the volunteer table. Word had spread through the parent WhatsApp group, and they all wanted to buy cookies and check on Ethan. One dad bought our entire tray of chocolate chip cookies for his office and handed Ethan a $50 bill. Another mom grabbed 3 boxes of sugar cookies and told Ethan loudly that he was the best salesperson she'd ever seen. The line at our booth stretched past 4 other tables now, and Ethan was glowing with pride as he handled each order. Christine came back carrying a manila folder and a clipboard, walking with purpose through the crowd. She showed me the official complaint forms for the Office for Civil Rights, explaining each section and where to sign. She mentioned quietly that Mrs. Rhodes had 2 previous complaints that were swept under the rug, but this time would be different. A group of parents had gathered near the playground and were having an animated discussion with lots of hand gestures. They walked over as a group, and the one in front asked if we'd be willing to speak at the next school board meeting about what happened today. She said they were demanding better training on inclusion and disability rights for all staff. My husband immediately said yes, and I nodded, knowing Ethan's story needed to be heard by the people who made the rules. The principal's voice came over the loudspeaker announcing the bake sale would close in 15 minutes. Parents rushed to make final purchases, and our remaining cookies disappeared fast. Ethan carefully counted the money in our cash box, separating bills by denomination like he'd practiced. The principal stood next to him, watching with a genuine smile as Ethan announced we'd raised $847. He high-fived Ethan and said it was more than double what any single booth had ever raised before. Parents started packing up their booths but kept stopping by ours to exchange phone numbers and promise support. Several mentioned they were requesting transfers out of Mrs. Rhodes' Rhodes' class on Monday morning. The principal overheard this and his jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. More parents kept coming over while we folded up our tent and packed the display cases into boxes. A mom from Ethan's class pressed her phone number into my hand and said she was calling the district office first thing Monday to get her daughter moved to a different teacher. Another dad helped my husband load the cash register into our car and mentioned he'd already emailed the superintendent about what he witnessed today. 3 more families stopped us before we could leave, all wanting our contact info and promising to show up at any meetings we needed support for. Ethan sat in the back seat counting the money again while parents kept knocking on our car windows to exchange numbers. The principal stood by his own car watching all this happen, and I saw him pull out his phone and start typing something. That Sunday night, George called to tell us the GoFundMe had hit $2,000 already, and people were sharing the videos everywhere. Monday morning, we got a call from the district office asking us to come in for an emergency meeting at 10. We dropped Ethan at my mom's house and drove to the district building where Christine was waiting in the lobby. She walked us to a conference room where the superintendent sat with the principal and a woman in a suit who introduced herself as the district's legal counsel. The superintendent started by apologizing for what happened Saturday and told us Mrs. Rhodes had been placed on administrative leave effective immediately while they investigated the discrimination complaints that multiple families had now filed. The lawyer slid papers across the table showing they were offering Ethan a new teacher right away, plus extra support services and counseling if he needed it to deal with what happened. Christine added that the whole district would be getting mandatory training on disability awareness and inclusion, and if Mrs. Rhodes came back, she'd have to complete extra training first. They asked what else we needed to make this right for Ethan. My husband said we wanted everything documented and a guarantee this wouldn't happen to other kids. The superintendent nodded and promised they'd put new policies in writing. That evening, we were eating dinner when my phone buzzed with texts from neighbors saying to turn on the news. There was Molly on Channel 7 standing outside the school with her microphone. The segment showed clips from Saturday with Ethan in his chef hat serving cookies and explaining his different flavors to customers. They interviewed George, who talked about how the community came together to support a kid who just wanted to help his grandma. Molly mentioned the discrimination briefly, but focused mostly on how Ethan raised more money than any student in the school history. The piece ended with a shot of Ethan's banner and Molly saying anyone who wanted to help could find the GoFundMe link on their website. My phone started going crazy with notifications. The GoFundMe was climbing fast, jumping from $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 in just hours. By Tuesday morning, when I checked, it had passed $5,000. I showed Ethan the total and his eyes got huge. We looked up electric wheelchairs online and realized we could get Grandma one of the really nice ones that could go up curbs and had a long battery life. Ethan wanted to call her right away, but we decided to wait until we actually had the chair to surprise her. Wednesday was the school board meeting and the parking lot was already full when we arrived 30 minutes early. People were standing in the hallway because all the seats in the meeting room were taken. Why did Mrs. Rhodes' previous complaints get swept under the rug if Christine knew about them? Makes me wonder what kind of connections she has at this school. The timing of the superintendent showing up right when the news crew did feels awfully convenient too. Almost like someone orchestrated this whole scene for maximum impact. Parents I'd never met before came up to introduce themselves and say they were there to support us. The board president had to move the meeting to the gym to fit everyone. When it was time for public comment, parent after parent stood up demanding accountability and better training for teachers. Then it was Ethan's turn to speak. My husband walked him to the microphone and adjusted it down to his height. Ethan told them about practicing his sales pitch for weeks and how excited he was to finally be was included in something. His voice cracked when he described reading Mrs. Rhodes' email saying he wasn't equipped to participate. One board member wiped her eyes and another one was staring at the table. When Ethan finished, a board member named Mr. Harrison looked directly at him and apologized for the district failing to protect him from discrimination. The whole gym erupted in applause. After all the comments, the board went into emergency session and came back with a unanimous vote to implement new inclusion policies and require quarterly disability rights training for all staff. They also announced they were creating a parent advisory committee for special education and asked if I'd be willing to serve on it. I said yes immediately. 2 days later, we got a call from a lawyer representing Mrs. Rhodes who said his client wanted to discuss a settlement to avoid any further legal action. My husband told him we weren't interested in money. We wanted the investigation to continue, so there would be a public record of what she did. The lawyer tried to convince us that a quiet settlement would be better for everyone, especially Ethan, but we held firm. We wanted other families to know what happened and for there to be real consequences. 2 weeks passed with Ethan adjusting to his new teacher, Mrs. Peterson, who seemed genuinely excited to have him in class. Then Christine called to tell us the investigation was complete. They'd found multiple violations of federal disability law, and Mrs. Rhodes' employment had been terminated. The district was also implementing systematic changes, including better screening for teacher bias and a new reporting system for discrimination concerns. The next Monday, Mrs. Peterson sent home a note asking if Ethan would like to do a cooking demonstration for the class as part of their life skills unit. Ethan was so excited he could barely sit still at dinner. We helped him plan a simple recipe the kids could follow and practiced his presentation all week. That Friday, I brought the ingredients to the school and watched from the back of the room as Ethan taught 25 kids how to make no-bake cookies. Mrs. Peterson had gotten paper chef hats for everyone and let Ethan decorate them with markers during art time earlier. He showed them each step, walking around to help kids who were struggling, using his Gordon voice to make them laugh. The kids were measuring ingredients carefully while Ethan walked between their desks checking their work, and one girl accidentally dumped too much cocoa powder everywhere, but Ethan just laughed and helped her clean it up. Mrs. Peterson took photos of the whole class in their chef hats holding up their finished cookies and posted them on the school website that afternoon. The principal stopped by at the end and announced something that made Ethan's jaw drop. Starting next week, there would be Chef Ethan Fridays, where Ethan would help plan and serve special snacks for students with perfect attendance each month. Ethan would get to pick the recipes and lead a team of student helpers in the cafeteria kitchen every Friday morning before classes started. The first Chef Ethan Friday was chaos in the best way, with 12 kids trying to help make fruit kebabs and mini muffins while Ethan directed them like a tiny Gordon Ramsay, making everyone laugh with his accent. By the third week, he had a system down and was teaching the other kids proper knife skills for cutting fruit and how to pipe frosting on cupcakes. The cafeteria staff loved having him there because he took it so seriously and always cleaned up perfectly afterward. 3 months after the bake sale, we held a special ceremony in the gym to present Grandma with her new electric wheelchair that the fundraising money had bought. The whole school came, and Ethan stood at the microphone in his chef outfit giving a speech he'd practiced for weeks, thanking everyone who bought cookies and supported him. Grandma was crying as she tested out the wheelchair, doing circles on the gym floor while everyone cheered, and Mrs. Peterson filmed everything for the school website. The district contacted us the next week asking permission to use George's videos from the bake sale in their new training program about recognizing discrimination. They wanted to show teachers what discrimination looked like and how the community response should work, and we signed the forms immediately. George told us later that the training video was being shown at every school in the district, and even some neighboring districts had requested copies. Other families started reaching out through Facebook and email thanking us for speaking up because the new policies were already helping their kids. One mom said her daughter with Down syndrome was finally included in art class presentations, and another dad said his son with ADHD wasn't being excluded from field trips anymore. We started meeting once a month at the library with these families to make sure the changes kept happening and to support each other when new problems came up. Meanwhile, Ethan had started asking about selling cookies at the farmer's market. After several parents kept asking where they could buy more, we got the proper permits and health department approval and set up a small booth every Saturday morning with the same banner from the bake sale. The first weekend we sold out in 2 hours and had to start baking triple batches to keep up with demand. Ethan donated 20% of profits to the local autism society and kept careful records in a notebook showing every sale and donation. His cookies became so popular that the market organizers gave him a permanent corner spot and featured him in their newsletter. 6 months later, the state education department called saying our district's new inclusion policies were being recognized as a model program. They wanted Ethan and me to speak at their annual conference about turning discrimination into positive change and how one family's experience led to district-wide improvements. We spent weeks preparing our presentation with Ethan practicing his part about how the bake sale changed his life and made him realize he could do anything. At the conference, 200 educators watched Ethan explain in his Gordon Ramsay voice how Mrs. Rhodes tried to stop him, but the community stood up for what was right. The Youth Entrepreneurship Council somehow heard about Ethan's cookie business and nominated him for their annual award. The ceremony was held in our school gym 6 months after the original bake sale, with the whole district invited to attend. The principal gave a speech about how Ethan transformed their understanding of inclusion and presented him with the award and a check for $500. Ethan used his acceptance speech to do his best Gordon impression, thanking his brilliant kitchen brigade and announcing he was using the money to buy baking supplies for kids who couldn't afford them. Christine became like family after everything that happened and came to dinner every few weeks to check on Ethan and help update his education plan. She made sure his IEP included time for his business activities as part of his math and life skills curriculum so he could count it as schoolwork. She also connected us with other families going through similar discrimination and helped them file complaints and navigate the system. The parent network we'd formed kept growing and successfully pushed for the same policy changes in 3 neighboring districts, using our story as an example. We testified at the school board meetings and shared our documentation, showing how the changes improved outcomes for all students, not just those with disabilities. Ethan started speaking at the school assemblies twice a year about inclusion and acceptance, using his Gordon voice to keep kids laughing while teaching them important lessons. He'd tell the story of the bake sale, but focus on how everyone working together made change happen and how differences make people stronger, not weaker. Teachers requested him for classroom visits where he'd teach simple recipes while talking about autism and how his brain worked differently, but that just meant he noticed things others missed. The school year flew by with Ethan teaching cooking basics to different classes every month and kids actually getting excited when they saw him in the hallway. Spring came and went, and summer break started with Ethan working 3 mornings a week at the bakery that supplied our school cafeteria. The owner had called me after reading about everything online and offered Ethan a junior apprenticeship where he'd learn real professional techniques. Every morning I'd drop him off at 5:30 and he'd help prep dough for the day, while the head baker taught him about yeast and proofing times. He came home covered in flour but glowing with pride about the hundreds of rolls he'd shaped or the new piping technique he'd mastered. The bakery even let him design a special cookie that they sold with a sign saying it was created by Chef Ethan. By the end of summer, he'd saved $800 for his college fund, and the head baker wrote him a recommendation letter for culinary programs. That fall, when school started again, the principal called us to his office, but this time with good news. The district wanted to give Ethan their first ever Student Advocate Award at the big assembly where Grandma would present it to him. Mrs. Rhodes hiring a lawyer to push for a quiet settlement makes me wonder what else she might be worried about coming to light during this investigation. The timing of her lawyer calling right after the board meeting seems calculated to avoid more public scrutiny of her past behavior with other students. The morning of the ceremony, Grandma rolled up to the school in her new electric wheelchair that we'd bought with all the fundraising money from that first bake sale. She wore her best dress and had tears in her eyes watching Ethan walk across that stage in his chef apron to accept his award. The whole auditorium stood up clapping, and Ethan did his Gordon voice to thank everyone for believing in him, which made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. A publisher contacted us that winter saying they wanted to turn our story into a children's book about standing up to discrimination. Ethan spent weeks working with the illustrator on the drawings and insisted the cookies in the pictures looked exactly right. The book came out the next spring with all proceeds going to disability advocacy groups, and copies were donated to every elementary school library in our state. Teachers started using it in their classrooms to talk about inclusion, and we got letters from parents saying it helped their kids understand autism better. Meanwhile, at the school, Ethan thrived with his new teachers who celebrated what he could do instead of focusing on his challenges. They let him use his baking skills for math problems and his Gordon impressions for public speaking practice. His grades went up and he made actual friends who invited him to birthday parties and wanted to learn his cookie recipes. At the end of year award ceremony that May, Ethan got called up 3 different times for entrepreneurship and advocacy and academic improvement. Each time the crowd gave him standing ovations and his smile got bigger and bigger until I thought his face might split. The principal announced we were starting an annual Chef Ethan bake sale that would be the school's biggest fundraiser specifically to help families with special needs kids. Ethan would be head chef and train other students in baking and running a business with all the money going to support programs and equipment. The first one raised over $3,000, and Ethan ran it like a professional kitchen with stations and timers and quality control. Kids who'd never talked to him before were asking for his advice and following his instructions about proper measuring techniques. Looking back now, I can't believe how one terrible email from Mrs. Rhodes turned into all of this positive change for our whole district. Ethan found his voice and learned he could stand up for himself, while our community learned what happens when people come together against discrimination. The policies changed and the training happened, and now kids with disabilities get real support instead of being pushed aside. Today was the spring festival, and Ethan ran his booth surrounded by friends who see him as just Ethan, not as the autistic kid. He wore his chef hat and apron while teaching little kids how to frost cookies and explaining different flavor combinations to parents. Grandma sat in her wheelchair next to the booth helping with the cash box and telling everyone who'd listen about her amazing grandson. I watched them working together with matching smiles and remembered that awful night when Ethan cried about being too stupid to sell cookies. Now here he was running the most popular booth at the festival with a line of customers waiting to buy from Chef Ethan. The same parents who Mrs. Rhodes claimed had expectations about who represented our school were taking selfies with Ethan and posting about how proud they were of him. Even the new special education coordinator who replaced Christine when she got promoted made sure to stop by and buy a dozen cookies while praising Ethan's business skills. Thanks for hanging out and wondering through all these curious moments with me today. It's always interesting sharing the ride together. Until next time, take care. And hey, subscribe for more content like this.